The first time Silas Mercer heard the silent woman scream, there was no sound at all. He saw it in her face from across the muddy street. Her eyes went wide. Her hands froze around the small sack of flour she carried. A rider in a dark coat had just entered Red Willow, and the moment she saw him, all the color left her cheeks. Then the church bell rang. A wagon rolled between them, and the stranger disappeared behind a line of horses. By the time Silas crossed the street, the woman was gone. Everyone in Red Willow knew Evelyn Hart as the woman who never spoke. She had arrived 6 weeks earlier on a cold stage from the east. She carried one leather bag, a gray coat, and a small wooden box tied with rope. She rented the room above Mrs. Pruitt's bakery and began working there before sunrise. Every morning, Evelyn kneaded bread in the warm kitchen. Every afternoon, she carried baskets to the hotel, the sheriff's office, and the general store. She always nodded when spoken to. She always paid what she owed, but nobody had heard her say a single word. Some people believed she had lost her voice from illness. Others said she was hiding from the law. Nora Bell, who knew every piece of gossip before breakfast, claimed Evelyn had buried a husband somewhere in Kansas. "She has the eyes of a guilty woman," Nora told anyone willing to listen. Silas did not believe that. He had seen guilty men before. They watched doors, they counted horses, they kept one hand close to a gun. Evelyn did none of those things. She watched people's mouths. Whenever someone spoke to her, her eyes moved to their lips as if she were trying to understand the shape of every word. Then her fingers tightened against her dress, and fear rose in her face. Silas knew fear when he saw it. His blacksmith shop stood beside the well at the center of town. From morning until dark, he repaired wagon wheels, shaped horseshoes, and fixed broken tools. He was 34 years old, tall, quiet, and strong enough to lift a wagon axle alone. People trusted Silas because he did not ask many questions. He had learned long ago that questions could feel like knives when a person carried pain. 10 years earlier, his father had died beneath a falling mine beam. Silas had been there. He had spent hours digging through rock with bleeding hands, listening to his father's voice grow weaker. After that day, Silas stopped speaking unless words were needed. Maybe that was why he noticed Evelyn. Silence did not make him uncomfortable. It felt familiar. On most mornings, Evelyn crossed the street with a bread basket on her arm. She passed his open forge while sparks flew from the iron. Silas always gave her a small nod. She always gave one back. That was all. Then one windy morning, a horse broke loose near the hotel. The animal charged down the street, dragging a broken hitching rail behind it. People jumped away. A woman screamed. Evelyn stood near the well with nowhere to move. Silas dropped his hammer and ran. He caught Evelyn around the waist and pulled her behind a water barrel just as the horse thundered past. The broken rail smashed through a stack of empty crates. For one moment, Evelyn was pressed against him, shaking so hard that he could feel it through her coat. "You're safe," Silas said. She looked up at him. Her lips moved. No sound came. Then she pushed away and hurried toward the bakery. That evening, Silas found something lying near the well. It was a silver locket. Inside was a tiny painting of a young boy with dark hair. Behind the painting, someone had scratched 2 words into the metal. "For Evelyn." Silas closed the locket and placed it in his pocket. The next morning, Evelyn did not pass his forge. She did not come the morning after that either. On the 3rd day, Silas carried the locket to Mrs. Pruitt's bakery. The front room smelled of cinnamon and warm bread. Mrs. Pruitt stood behind the counter, dusted with flour. "She's upstairs," the older woman said before Silas could speak. "Won't come down, hardly eats." Silas placed the locket on the counter. "I found this near the well." Mrs. Pruitt's face changed when she saw it. "Where did she get that?" "I thought you might know." "I have never seen it." A floorboard creaked above them. Silas looked toward the stairs. Evelyn stood at the top. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Her face looked pale and tired. When she saw the locket, one hand flew to her throat. Silas picked it up. "This belongs to you." She came down slowly. When she reached the last step, he held it out. Evelyn took the locket with both hands and pressed it against her heart. Her eyes filled with tears. Silas waited. He did not ask who the boy was. He did not ask why she was afraid. He only said, "I'll be at the forge if you need anything." He turned toward the door. A soft sound stopped him. It was not a word. It was a breath trying to become one. Silas looked back. Evelyn stood with her mouth open, fighting against something inside herself. Her face tightened with shame when no sound came. Silas understood. "You don't owe me an answer," he said. The fear in her eyes eased. "Only a little, but enough." The next morning, she came to the forge. Silas was shaping a horseshoe when he noticed her standing outside. She held a small paper bag. He set down his hammer but did not walk toward her. Evelyn entered and placed the bag on his workbench. Inside were 2 warm biscuits. Silas smiled. "Thank you." She nodded. He returned to the iron. Evelyn stayed. There was a wooden chair beside the wall where customers sometimes waited. She sat there with her hands folded in her lap while Silas worked. The forge filled with the steady sound of hammer against metal. Silas did not speak. Evelyn did not leave. For the first time since she had come to Red Willow, she sat near another person without anyone demanding to know her story. The next morning, she returned with coffee. The morning after that, she brought nothing but herself. Soon, it became part of Silas's day. Evelyn sat near the doorway while he worked. Sometimes she watched the fire. Sometimes she read an old newspaper. Sometimes she closed her eyes and listened to the hammer. Silas began speaking in small pieces. "Cold night coming. That chestnut mare hates me. Sheriff's wagon will lose a wheel before Sunday." He never asked a question. Evelyn never answered. Still, something passed between them in the quiet. The town noticed. Nora Bell saw Evelyn leaving the forge one morning and nearly dropped her basket. By noon, everyone knew the silent woman was spending time with Silas Mercer. By supper, the story had become a secret courtship. That rumor angered Lydia Crane. Lydia was the daughter of the richest rancher in the county. She had spent 2 years expecting Silas to notice her. She brought him pies he did not ask for and found reasons to have her horse reshod. One afternoon, she entered the forge while Evelyn sat near the door. Lydia looked at her and smiled without kindness. "I did not know this was a resting place for strangers." Silas kept his eyes on the iron. "It's a chair." Lydia stepped closer to Evelyn. "People in this town are beginning to wonder about you." Evelyn lowered her eyes. Lydia continued. "A woman who refuses to speak usually has something to hide." Silas placed the hot iron into the water. Steam rose between them. "Or she has nothing she wishes to tell you." Lydia's smile vanished. She turned and left without another word. Evelyn looked at Silas. For a moment, he thought she might speak. Instead, she reached into her pocket and placed a folded piece of paper on his workbench. Silas opened it after she left. Only 4 words were written there. "Thank you for silence." He read them twice. Then he folded the paper and placed it inside his shirt pocket. That same evening, the rider in the dark coat returned. He tied his horse outside the hotel and asked the clerk for a room. His name was Warren Pike. He claimed to be a land agent from Colorado, but he carried no maps and asked nothing about land. Instead, he asked about Evelyn Hart. The hotel clerk told Nora Bell. Nora told the sheriff's wife. Before the lamps were lit, the whole town knew a stranger had come looking for the silent woman. Silas heard the news from a ranch hand who came for a broken stirrup. He stopped working. What did the man look like? Thin face, dark coat, scar near his left eye. Silas remembered the rider Evelyn had seen beside the church. He closed the forge early. When he reached the bakery, the front door stood open. A tray of bread lay broken across the floor. Mrs. Prout was crying behind the counter. "He came for her," she said. Silas looked toward the stairs. "Where is Evelyn?" Mrs. Prout shook her head. "Gone." Silas stepped outside and saw fresh wagon tracks behind the bakery. They led north toward the empty hills. Then he noticed something shining in the mud. Evelyn's silver locket. Silas picked it up. Inside, beneath the picture of the boy, there was something he had not seen before. A thin piece of paper had been hidden behind the painting. On it, written in faded ink, were 6 words. "He killed Daniel, he will kill me." Silas read the 6 words again. "He killed Daniel, he will kill me." The paper trembled in his hand. He looked toward the wagon tracks disappearing into the hills beyond Red Willow. Night was falling fast. The sheriff would want to wait until morning. Silas had no intention of waiting. He walked straight to Sheriff Owen Brooks's office. The sheriff listened without interrupting while Silas placed the locket and the hidden note on the desk. "You believe she left against her will?" Owen asked. Silas nodded. Mrs. Prout would never leave her bakery open. The bread was on the floor. Evelyn would never leave this behind. He held up the locket. Sheriff Brooks studied the tiny note. "If this is true, we're dealing with more than a family argument." Before either man could speak again, the bakery door burst open. Mrs. Prout hurried inside, still breathing hard. "I remembered something." Both men turned toward her. "When Evelyn first arrived, she asked me only one question." "What was it?" the sheriff asked. Mrs. Prout swallowed. She wanted to know if there was an old church north of town. Silas looked at the sheriff. "There is." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Abandoned 20 years ago." "Then that's where they're going." Within minutes, 4 riders left Red Willow. Sheriff Brooks, Deputy Miles, Silas Mercer, and old Ben Carter, who knew every trail through the hills. The moon climbed higher as they followed the wagon tracks. Nobody spoke much. The only sounds were horses breathing and leather creaking beneath their saddles. After nearly 2 hours, Ben raised his hand. Tracks leave the road. Fresh wagon marks turned into a narrow path leading toward thick pine trees. Hidden behind them stood the old stone church. Its roof had partly fallen in. One lantern burned inside. Silas climbed down before anyone could stop him. "You wait for my signal." The sheriff reached for his rifle. "You don't go alone. If they hear 4 men coming, she'll pay for it." Sheriff Brooks looked toward the church for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. 5 minutes. Silas slipped through the trees without another word. The broken church windows glowed with lantern light. As he moved closer, voices drifted into the night. "You've run long enough," a man said. Silas recognized the voice immediately. Cold. Patient. The voice of someone who enjoyed fear. "Warren Pike." Another voice answered. It belonged to Evelyn. It shook, but this time it carried words. "I signed nothing." "You don't need to. We already have papers." "They're false." "No judge will believe a woman who hides her own name." Silas edged closer until he could see through the broken window. Evelyn sat tied to a wooden chair. Her hands were bound behind her back. Warren Pike stood beside her. Across from him sat another man. Older, well-dressed, gray beard trimmed neatly. His expensive boots looked strange inside the broken church. Silas knew instantly this man was the one truly in charge. "You've made this much harder than necessary," the older man said calmly. "You should have stayed quiet." "I was quiet. For years." Evelyn looked directly at him. It still wasn't enough. The older man's smile disappeared. "It never is with stubborn people." He opened a leather case and removed several folded papers. "You'll sign these." "I won't." "You will." He nodded toward Warren. Warren stepped forward. He grabbed Evelyn's arm so hard that she cried out. Silas's hands closed into fists. Every part of him wanted to charge through the door. Instead, he forced himself to wait. The sheriff needed time. The older man leaned closer to Evelyn. "You remember Daniel?" Her face went white. "You said his name." "I know exactly what happened to Daniel." Evelyn's breathing became uneven. "He tried protecting you." The man smiled. "And look where it got him." Silas finally understood. Daniel was the boy from the locket. Not her son. Her younger brother. The man continued. Nobody questioned his accident. "They will now," Evelyn whispered. "They already have. You wrote it down." She looked away. The older man laughed quietly. "You always were foolish enough to believe paper could save you." Silas's eyes moved toward the church door. A shadow appeared outside. Sheriff Brooks. Another shadow. Deputy Miles. They were in position. Silas drew one slow breath. Then he kicked open the side door. The crash echoed through the church. Everyone spun around. Silas crossed the room before Warren could reach his gun. One punch sent the man crashing across an old wooden pew. The older stranger pulled a revolver from beneath his coat. "Don't move." Silas stopped. The barrel pointed straight at Evelyn. Sheriff Brooks entered through the front door. "Drop the weapon." The older man laughed. "I think not." Deputy Miles stepped through another doorway with his rifle ready. The stranger's smile faded. He had expected one man. "Not four." "You've nowhere to go," the sheriff said. "You'd be surprised." Without warning, the stranger shoved Evelyn's chair towards Silas. As Silas caught her before she struck the floor, the man fired once. The bullet shattered a church window. Horses outside panicked. Warren leaped through the broken glass and disappeared into the darkness. The older man followed. After them, the sheriff shouted. Deputy Miles and Ben Carter raced outside. Hoofbeats thundered into the hills. Silas ignored everything else. He cut the ropes from Evelyn's wrists with his pocket knife. Her hands shook violently. "You came." "I said you weren't alone." She stared at him. Then something inside her finally broke. Tears rolled down her face. "I thought." She struggled to breathe. "I thought nobody would." Silas wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "They're gone now." She shook her head. "No." She looked toward the open doorway. "You don't understand." Sheriff Brooks returned a few moments later. They escaped. Silas expected disappointment. Instead, Evelyn looked terrified. "The older man." "Who is he?" the sheriff asked. She closed her eyes. "My husband's business partner." "What business?" Her lips trembled. "He wasn't selling land." Silence filled the church. Then Evelyn whispered the words she had spent months trying not to say. They were stealing ranches. The sheriff frowned. "Explain." "They found widows. Old ranchers. People with no family. They forged papers. They took everything. And if someone refused? Her voice disappeared. Silas waited. He knew she would continue when she was ready. Finally, she looked at all three men. My brother Daniel found their records. He wanted to go to the law. They killed him. Sheriff Brooks removed his hat. Do you know the man's name? Evelyn nodded slowly. Victor Langford. The sheriff's face changed. Silas noticed immediately. You know him? Brooks answered quietly. I've heard that name before. Where? 3 counties east. He owns half the cattle routes. Silas looked toward the dark hills. He'll run. The sheriff shook his head. No. He'll come back. Why? Brooks looked at the papers scattered across the church floor. Because whatever he's looking for. He picked up one folded document. He didn't find it. Evelyn suddenly gasped. The wooden box. Silas frowned. What box? The one I carried when I came to Red Willow. Mrs. Pruitt had stored it beneath Evelyn's bed. Inside were Daniel's original account books. Every payment. Every false deed. Every stolen ranch. Enough evidence to send Victor Langford to prison for the rest of his life. Silas's heart sank. If Victor learns those books still exist. Evelyn looked straight into his eyes. He won't stop until he has them. Outside the ruined church, far beyond the trees, another horse stood on a distant ridge. A single rider watched the lantern light below. Victor Langford had not ridden away with Warren Pike. He had stayed behind. From the darkness, he watched Silas place Evelyn safely onto his horse. Then Victor smiled to himself. Now he knew exactly where the evidence was hidden. And before sunrise, he intended to burn the entire town of Red Willow to the ground. The people of Red Willow slept peacefully. None of them knew a man was riding toward their town with enough kerosene to turn every wooden building into ashes. Victor Langford did not want revenge. He wanted silence. If the account books burned, there would be no proof. If the witnesses disappeared, there would be no trial. By sunrise, he intended to erase both. Silas and Sheriff Brooks rode through the town gates just after midnight. Mrs. Pruitt rushed outside the bakery the moment she heard horses. She wrapped Evelyn in a tight embrace. Thank God. Evelyn hugged her back. For the first time since arriving in Red Willow, she did not hide her tears. Sheriff Brooks wasted no time. Lock every door. Wake every rancher. No one leaves town tonight. Within minutes, lanterns appeared across Main Street. Men gathered with rifles. Women carried children indoors. Nobody laughed anymore. The gossip about the quiet baker had disappeared. Now everyone understood. She had never been hiding from the town. She had been hiding from monsters. Silas carried the small wooden box from beneath Evelyn's bed. He placed it on the bakery table. Inside were 3 thick account books. Every page listed names, dates, money, forged land deeds, false signatures. Sheriff Brooks turned each page carefully. My God. Mrs. Pruitt looked over his shoulder. How many families? The sheriff answered quietly. Dozens. Evelyn finally spoke. My brother copied everything. He knew they would kill him. So he hid the originals. Silas closed the final book. Then Daniel died, making sure someone would one day find the truth. Evelyn nodded. He believed someone honest would. She looked at Silas. I think he finally did. Before Silas could answer, a church bell began ringing wildly. Not for Sunday. For danger. A young ranch hand burst through the bakery door. They're coming. How many? 6 riders. They're carrying torches. Sheriff Brooks stood immediately. They're here. The town exploded into motion. Men overturned wagons across the main road. Water barrels were rolled into the street. Women hurried children into the stone church. Silas walked to the forge. Without saying a word, he pulled glowing iron from the fire. His hammer rang across Red Willow. Once. Twice. Again. The sound spread through the sleeping valley. Every person in town knew that sound. The blacksmith was calling them together. 6 riders appeared at the edge of town. Victor Langford rode in front. His expensive coat moved gently in the night wind. He smiled as though arriving for a business meeting. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble," he called. Sheriff Brooks stepped into the street. "You've caused enough yourself." Victor looked toward Evelyn. "There you are." She did not step back. "You murdered my brother." Victor shrugged. He should have minded his own business. Silence fell over the street. Even the horses seemed to stop breathing. Then Evelyn took one step forward. "No." She said it clearly. Loudly. "You should have." Victor laughed. "You finally found your voice." "I did. And you'll never take it away again." Victor's smile faded. He lifted his rifle. Before he could aim, a gunshot echoed across town. Sheriff Brooks fired first. Victor's horse reared. The fight began. Torches flew through the air. One landed on the roof of the general store. Silas grabbed a bucket before the flames could spread. 2 ranchers climbed onto the roof and threw water across the burning boards. Meanwhile, Warren Pike rushed toward the bakery. He knew exactly where the evidence was hidden. He kicked open the front door. The wooden box sat on the table. He reached for it. Then Mrs. Prout struck him across the back with a heavy cast-iron pan. The blow dropped him to one knee. "You'll leave my kitchen alone," she shouted. Before Warren could stand, Deputy Miles burst inside and placed him under arrest. Outside, Victor realized everything was falling apart. Half his men had already surrendered. The others had fled into the hills. He turned his horse toward the north road. Silas saw him. Without thinking, he mounted his own horse and gave chase. The 2 riders raced across open fields beneath the moon. Victor looked back once. "You'll never catch me." Silas answered with silence. He simply rode faster. Near the old river crossing, Victor's horse stumbled on loose stones. The animal threw him hard onto the ground. His rifle slid into the river. Victor struggled to stand. Silas climbed down from his horse. The 2 men faced each other. Victor swung first. Silas blocked the punch and drove him backward. Victor reached for a knife hidden inside his boot. Silas caught his wrist. The knife fell into the grass. "You don't understand," Victor growled. "Men like me always win." Silas looked directly into his eyes. "No. Men like you only win while good people stay afraid." He struck Victor once. The outlaw collapsed. Moments later, Sheriff Brooks arrived with 2 deputies. Victor Langford was placed in irons before sunrise. He never smiled again. 3 weeks later, the circuit judge reached Red Willow. The courtroom overflowed. Families traveled from 3 counties to hear the evidence. Daniel's account books told the story better than any witness could. Every forged signature matched. Every stolen ranch was recorded. Every payment had a date. Victor Langford and Warren Pike were found guilty on every charge. The stolen ranches were returned to their rightful owners. Many widows who had believed everything was lost received their homes back. When the judge thanked Evelyn for her courage, the courtroom became completely silent. Everyone waited. Months earlier, she would have lowered her head. Instead, Evelyn stood. Her hands still trembled. Her heart still raced. But this time she spoke. I wasn't brave because I wasn't afraid. She paused. I was brave because someone believed me before they knew my whole story. Her eyes found Silas across the room. And sometimes, her voice softened. That's enough to save a life. Many people in the courtroom wiped away tears. Even Sheriff Brooks quietly cleared his throat. Summer slowly became autumn. Life returned to Red Willow. Mrs. Pruitt's bakery filled every morning with laughter. Children often stopped at the forge just to watch Silas work. They also liked talking to Evelyn. She listened carefully to every story they told. She never hurried anyone. She knew how much courage it could take to speak. One cool October afternoon, Silas carried a freshly built wooden bench outside the forge. He placed it beneath the same cottonwood tree where Evelyn often sat. She smiled. It looks familiar. It should. It's meant for waiting. She laughed softly. No. It's meant for finding peace. Silas sat beside her. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The quiet felt warm instead of lonely. Finally, Silas reached into his pocket. He held out a small velvet box. I've never been very good with speeches. Evelyn smiled. I noticed. So I'll keep this simple. He opened the box. Inside rested a plain gold ring. Evelyn Hart, you never had to earn my respect. You never had to explain your past. I only want to spend the rest of my life building your future. Tears filled her eyes once more. This time they came with a smile. Yes. It was one small word. But everyone passing along Main Street heard it. The wedding took place before the first snowfall. The entire town came. Mrs. Pruitt baked enough bread for everyone. Sheriff Brooks stood beside Silas. Children covered the church steps with autumn flowers. Even Nora Bell cried through most of the ceremony. Later, she insisted she had always admired Evelyn. Nobody argued. Some stories were better left in the past. Years later, travelers passing through Red Willow always noticed the same thing. Outside the old blacksmith shop stood a wooden bench. Sometimes a tired stranger sat there. Sometimes a frightened traveler. Sometimes someone carrying more pain than words. No one was ever asked to explain. Because Silas and Evelyn had learned the truth that changed their lives forever. A person does not always need questions to heal. Sometimes all they need is a quiet place to sit. And someone kind enough to stay.